The world was still, as if holding its breath, when the first signs appeared. Earth's defense satellites had always been the best, tracking comets, asteroids, and the occasional stray space debris. But this was different. At first, it was nothing more than a faint disturbance in the atmosphere, almost invisible to the untrained eye. But then the anomaly grew. Rapidly, the global news networks went silent, save for a strange signal broadcasted from the United Nations headquarters in New York City. The world's attention was drawn there, as the leaders of Earth held an emergency meeting, trying to piece together the information coming in from every corner of the planet. Commander Laura Tan, a brilliant scientist with the Earth Defense Network, sat at her console in a darkened room, her eyes glued to the screen. A foreign fleet, unlike anything Earth had ever seen, was entering the atmosphere. Thousands of ships, gleaming metallic structures that seemed to bend the very air around them, appeared out of nowhere. Their designs were sleek, menacing, and strangely organic, a sharp contrast to the cold, mechanical ships humanity had grown accustomed to seeing in the depths of space. "This can't be real," Tan muttered, her fingers tapping furiously against her keyboard. The radar systems were struggling to make sense of the readings. It was like trying to comprehend a new language, one that defied the laws of physics. As the ships neared Earth's orbit, the panic began. Governments scrambled to make sense of the threat. National leaders spoke in hushed tones, uncertain whether the signal was a warning or an invitation to surrender. The United Nations was thrust into chaos as delegations from all nations attempted to coordinate a response, but the true scale of the situation only became clearer when the first alien ship broke through Earth's atmosphere, sending shockwaves across major cities. In New York, the skies darkened as the massive craft cast a shadow over the city, a silhouette of power. It was unlike anything humanity had ever built. The Valkyr had arrived. As the ships touched down in major cities across the globe, the destruction was instantaneous. Their weapons emitted blinding pulses of energy, slicing through the atmosphere like a hot knife through butter. Buildings crumbled. The ground shook violently. Humanity, caught completely off guard, found itself helpless. The invaders had made no demands. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They only attacked. There was no sign of diplomacy, no sign of mercy, just devastation. But among the rising chaos, one voice cut through the confusion. The voice of the President of the United States echoed over emergency broadcasts to every corner of the Earth. "People of Earth," the President began, their voice steady but filled with anger. "We do not surrender. We do not fall. We will fight with everything we have. Our world, our home, will not be claimed by invaders. Earth will stand together." Simultaneously, all the world's leaders, regardless of nation or ideology, united behind that single statement. A message was sent to the invaders, a message meant to echo across the stars. How dare you invade Earth? The Valkyr had underestimated humanity's resolve, but they had yet to see the true power of the planet they had come to conquer. The invasion was supposed to be a formality. The Valkyr, with their immense power, expected Earth to fall within hours. They had crushed civilizations across the galaxy without breaking a sweat. Humanity, they believed, was no different. A primitive species, unprepared for the superior might of their fleet. But what they didn't account for was the defiance of a species backed into a corner, unwilling to surrender their world without a fight. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for everything it held dear. The Valkyr might have superior firepower, but they underestimated human resilience. Commander Sarah Drake stood at the head of the emergency summit, her expression hardened by the weight of the situation. As Earth's leaders argued and debated, she spoke up, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We don't have time for speeches," she said. "We need action. Now." Her words set off a wave of unity, a rallying cry that resonated with leaders around the globe. Within hours, a global coalition was formed. Countries previously at odds now found common ground, their differences set aside for the greater good. Military forces, once isolated in their national borders, began working together as one unified force. On the ground, cities were abandoned as civilians scattered into the wilderness or underground shelters, determined to survive whatever came next. But in the heart of these urban areas, something remarkable was happening. Despite the destruction, people began organizing. Resistance groups formed spontaneously, rising up with whatever weapons they could find. Some built barricades with scrap metal, while others turned everyday items into makeshift weapons, anything that could be used to strike back at their invaders. Human ingenuity took center stage. Earth's scientists, previously divided by politics and borders, now collaborated as never before. The world's brightest minds worked around the clock, studying Valkar technology, hacking into their communication systems, and identifying vulnerabilities. Earth's forces began using Valkar weaponry against them, adapting alien technology and reprogramming it to target the invaders' own ships. In a world that was supposed to be helpless, humans began to fight back, wildly, unpredictably, but with devastating effectiveness. In the skies above, the Valkar ships were initially a sight to behold, powerful, otherworldly, unstoppable. But the longer they stayed, the more they became entangled in Earth's defense. The Valkar didn't understand what they were facing. They thought humans were only capable of desperation and fear, but what they were seeing was an entirely different force, an unrelenting will to survive and to protect their home at any cost. The Valkar were not used to this. They had seen civilizations crumble before them, their resistance a mere whisper before their overwhelming might. But on Earth, there was something more. The enemy they faced wasn't just defending their planet. It was fighting with a fury and unity they couldn't have imagined. Commander Tikath, watching the unfolding battle from his command ship, frowned as his reports came in. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath. "How are they doing this?" It was clear now that Earth wasn't going down without a fight. The invaders may have the power, but humanity had something far more potent, the will to win. The Valkar might have arrived with the intent to conquer, but they were now facing something they had never prepared for, an enemy that would not bow, no matter how powerful the odds. Commander Tikath stood on the observation deck of his flagship, his fists clenched at his sides as he watched Earth's defenses intensify. The initial shock of the invasion was fading, and in its place, something unexpected had taken root, a fierce, unrelenting resistance. Despite the Valkar's technological superiority, Earth had not only survived, but it had begun to push back. Tikath's mind churned with disbelief. How are they doing this? He muttered to no one in particular. These primitives should have crumbled by now. The Valkar had a well-earned reputation for obliterating lesser civilizations. Their advanced weaponry, their vast fleets, their ruthless strategies. Everything about their conquest was designed for efficiency. And yet, the Earthlings weren't bowing down. Instead, they fought with an intensity that was completely foreign to him. They adapted faster than his analysts had predicted, exploiting every weakness in the Valkar's arsenal. In the command room below, Tikath's officers presented him with the latest report. Their communications had been hacked, their weapons tampered with, and their supply lines continuously sabotaged by human forces. Worst of all, their ships, once seen as invincible, were being destroyed at an alarming rate. "Report," Tikath demanded, his voice low and controlled. "Our fleet has sustained significant damage, Commander. Several of our destroyers are disabled. We've detected a pattern. These humans are attacking with unconventional tactics. They're not fighting like any other species we've encountered." Tikath's frustration deepened. He had expected to face a disorganized, frightened population, one that would fold under pressure. Instead, he was dealing with an enemy that was quick to adapt, quick to learn. It was as if Earth had tapped into an endless well of creativity, using their environment and their limited resources to fight with a cunning unlike anything he had seen before. "They're using our own technology against us," another officer said, pointing to a holographic map of the battlefield. They've repurposed Valkar energy cannons into handheld weapons. And their military forces, they're not acting like a typical army. They're everywhere, coming from all directions. Unpredictable. Tikath's mind raced. How could this be happening? The Valkar had crushed countless civilizations, each more advanced than the last. Yet, humans, who, until a few months ago, had barely mastered space travel, were forcing them into a corner. Tikath gritted his teeth. "They are not more powerful than us," he said, his voice steely with resolve. "They are simply more persistent. We will crush them. We will break their will, and their primitive weapons will be nothing against our might." Yet in the pit of his stomach, a seed of doubt began to sprout. For the first time in his long career, Tikath couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this fight. The humans were relentless, refusing to bend, refusing to break. In his mind, a new question began to form. What if this isn't about strength at all? On the ground, humanity's fight continued. Resistance movements in cities were growing stronger, more coordinated. The Valkar may have come to Earth expecting to conquer it with overwhelming force, but they had not expected the fire of human spirit, the unyielding drive that had always defined humanity's greatest achievements. For the first time, Commander Tikath felt unsure. The Valkar were no longer the predators. They were the prey. The battle was far from over, but something was changing in the air. As the Valkar fleet descended on Earth, wreaking havoc with their superior weapons, the human resistance was no longer just a nuisance. It had become a force to be reckoned with. The Valkar, who had assumed Earth's military would crumble under their power, were beginning to experience the first real signs of vulnerability. Commander Sarah Drake stood in the midst of a strategy room deep in a military base, staring at the holographic map before her. The map showed Earth's major cities, now divided between territories controlled by the Valkar and the growing patches of resistance that humanity had managed to carve out. She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Against all odds, humanity was fighting back. And in the process, they were learning how to turn the tide. "Commander, the Valkar have begun regrouping near Beijing and Moscow. They're pulling back their outer forces, consolidating their remaining strength for a final push," Lieutenant Jackson reported, his voice tense but steady. Drake's brow furrowed as she considered their options. The Valkar had underestimated Earth's ability to adapt and fight back, but this new development worried her. They weren't running out of resources. They were regrouping, preparing for something much worse. "We need to hit them before they can strengthen their defenses," she said, her voice sharp. "Time is not on our side. We take advantage of their confusion now, or we risk losing the momentum we've built." As the room hummed with activity, her eyes drifted to the screens around her. News from the front lines, scattered reports of small victories, of human ingenuity turning the tide. It wasn't just the military now. Civilians were stepping up in ways no one could have predicted. People who had once lived simple lives were repurposing civilian vehicles into makeshift armored transports, while others used what little they had to fashion homemade explosives. Earth's war effort wasn't just driven by generals and soldiers. It was a global uprising. Drake couldn't help but be moved by it. The sheer determination. People who had nothing, faced with impossible odds, were coming together to protect their world. It was something beyond strategy. It was a force of will. The Valkar might have superior technology, but they didn't understand what Earth had. A deep, unshakable bond to their home. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in the heart of the Valkar command center, Tikath's anger was palpable. He had expected victory to be swift, but instead, he was finding his forces stretched thin. His soldiers had underestimated the human capacity for creativity, resourcefulness, and stubbornness. They were using Earth's terrain to their advantage, creating traps that lured Valkar forces into ambushes. They had taken the Valkar's advanced weapons and used them in ways they never intended. "We're losing ground, Commander," his second-in-command reported urgently. "The human forces are launching an assault on our supply lines. They've breached our communication network. We can't stop them. Kath clenched his fists, his mind racing. There had to be an answer, something they could do to break this human resolve. But for the first time since the invasion began, he wasn't sure what it was. Earth was not just fighting for survival, it was fighting for a future. In the streets below, humanity was proving something that would forever echo across the galaxy. The Valkyr might have been technologically superior, but Earth had a weapon they could not defeat, the human spirit. The humans refused to bend, refused to break, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. They had something the Valkyr did not: hope, a bond to their home, and an unyielding drive to protect it at any cost. Drake's voice broke through the silence in the command room. We have them on the ropes. It's time to hit them hard. The final push had begun. As the battle for Earth raged on, news of humanity's unyielding resistance spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Valkyr, once confident in their ability to crush this insignificant species, were now losing ground. The human resistance was stronger than anyone, including the Galactic Council, had anticipated. And now, the galaxy's most powerful governing body was forced to take notice. In the heart of the Galactic Council's capital, the massive chamber buzzed with heated debate. Representatives from various alien civilizations, each more advanced and powerful than the next, gathered to discuss the growing situation on Earth. Some argued that Earth should be left to fight its own battle, while others were beginning to question the Valkyr's actions and the implications for the rest of the galaxy. Do we sit back and watch as the Valkyr fail in their conquest of this primitive planet? Ambassador Rinar of the Telkar Dominion demanded, his voice cold and calculating. We are witnessing a catastrophic failure of a military operation that was supposed to be foolproof. The Valkyr are a respected power in the galaxy. This embarrassment is not just theirs, it's ours. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room as Reinar's words resonated with many in the council. The Telkar Dominion was one of the most powerful entities in the galaxy, and Reinar had long been a vocal advocate for maintaining order and stability. If the Valkyr could not succeed on Earth, it would reflect poorly on the entire Council's authority. You speak of embarrassment, Reinar, interrupted High Counselor Kilth of the Xantari species, her many eyes narrowing. But we must consider something more crucial. This primitive planet is displaying a level of resilience we have not seen in centuries. The humans have a capacity for unity, for resistance, unlike any species we've encountered. Counselor Kilth's words carried weight. The Xantari were known for their unparalleled intelligence and deep understanding of intergalactic dynamics. Kilth's cold, analytical mind was now grappling with an unsettling truth. Humanity's fight was no longer simply about defense. It was a challenge to the very nature of the galaxy's established order. The Valkyr's strength lies in their military superiority, yes, Kilth continued. But humanity's true strength lies in its will to fight. It is an ancient trait, one we lost long ago. Perhaps it is time we reconsider our position on Earth. Her statement caused a ripple of shock throughout the chamber. For centuries, the Galactic Council had maintained its strict policy of non-interference, especially in the matters of newly discovered or lesser-developed civilizations. To entertain the idea of allowing Earth to rise in influence within the Council was unheard of, perhaps even dangerous. Are you suggesting we offer them a seat at the table? Ambassador Tizor of the Vraxa questioned, his antennae twitching with disbelief. These humans, with their primitive technology and their unpredictable nature. Kilth's gaze hardened. Yes, I believe we may have underestimated them. The Valkyr's failure is not just a result of military miscalculations. It's an indication that this planet holds something unique, something we have overlooked. A tense silence fell over the room. The weight of her words settled on the council members, many of whom had never imagined the possibility of welcoming a species like humanity into their fold. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Commander Tikath was seething in frustration. He had not expected the battle to last this long, let alone face a full-scale defeat at the hands of a species he had dismissed as primitive. The more he fought, the more the realization dawned on him. The humans were not just defending their home. They were defining themselves as a new force in the galaxy, and the Galactic Council was starting to take notice. The day had arrived, the final push that would determine the fate of Earth. After months of relentless fighting, the resistance had grown bolder. Cities once thought to be lost had been retaken by human ingenuity, and the Valkyr were struggling to hold their ground. Commander Tikaf could feel the pressure mounting. The Valkyr were used to quick victories, to overwhelming force, but this time, Earth had become a battlefield that refused to yield. The human spirit was something he had never truly understood until now. His ships, once impervious to all but the most concentrated firepower, were beginning to crack under the onslaught of Earth's repurposed technology. As his fleet approached Earth's final defense line, what little remained of the planet's cities now turned into military strongholds. Kath couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something crucial was slipping away from him. "Commander, we have incoming fire," a voice from his communications console reported. "The Earthlings have begun their offensive." On the surface, the human forces were staging one last coordinated assault. Using what they called the Last Stand Initiative, they deployed every weapon they had, every civilian volunteer turned soldier. They had transformed ordinary streets into fortified redoubts, turning every corner into a trap. As the Valkyr advanced, they were met with coordinated ambushes and strikes that shattered their supply lines and crippled their reinforcements. Tkath clenched his fists in frustration. The fight had shifted. It was no longer about sheer strength. It was about survival. Earth's resistance was now fighting as though there was no tomorrow, and in a way, they had nothing to lose. With every pulse of energy fired at the Valkyr ships, with every missile launched from hidden bunkers, humanity's fight became more and more a symbol of determination. But it wasn't just the fighting that had changed the tide. It was the strategy. The human resistance had come up with a plan so audacious that even the Valkyr couldn't have anticipated it. Over the past few weeks, Earth's top scientists had studied the Valkyr's energy signatures and learned to track their movements across the planet. They had figured out the frequency that powered their weapons, and now, using Earth-made electromagnetic pulse bombs, they had created a way to disable the Valkyr's shield systems. The first of the bombs went off at the outskirts of Paris, and the results were immediate. The Valkyr fleet, previously untouchable, began to falter. Shield systems, once thought to be impenetrable, flickered and shut down. The powerful beams of Valkyr weapons sputtered out. Their advantage had just been neutralized, and with it, the invaders' confidence began to erode. "It's working," Commander Drake muttered to herself, watching the results unfold on the screen before her. Earth had turned the tide in a way no one had thought possible. The Valkyr were no longer the unstoppable force they had been. Now, they were simply another enemy, vulnerable and retreating. Yet, as the situation grew more dire for the Valkyr, the Galactic Council's interest deepened. The alien leaders, who had initially dismissed Earth's fight as a temporary inconvenience, now recognized that humanity might be capable of achieving something extraordinary. High Counselor Kilth's voice echoed across the galaxy, her words now aimed at the Valkyr. "Your arrogance has cost you more than victory. It has cost you the future of this war." But it wasn't just the Council's words that mattered. The rest of the galaxy was watching. If Earth managed to hold its ground and repel the Valkyr invaders, it would send a message to the stars. A message that no force, no matter how advanced, could ever ignore. The tide of the war was shifting, slowly but surely. Earth, against all odds, had not only withstood the Valkyr's might, but was actively driving them back. Cities that had once been devastated now hummed with life as the resistance continued to press the attack. The human spirit, a force the Valkyr had underestimated, was proving to be the difference between defeat and victory. Yet, as the Valkyr fleet faltered, the stakes had grown far beyond the borders of Earth. The Galactic Council, for the first time in centuries, faced a dilemma. For millennia, they had maintained an unspoken rule of non-interference in the struggles of lesser species. But Earth had done what no one thought possible. They had not only defended their planet from the Valkyr, but they had begun to beat them at their own game. The question now wasn't just about Earth's survival. It was about whether or not humanity deserved a place at the table of galactic powers. At the heart of the Galactic Council, tensions were running high. The representatives of each species gathered in the immense, sterile chamber, their voices echoing in debate. For the first time, the Council could no longer pretend Earth was an insignificant outlier. Their audacity had caught the attention of even the most powerful races. "We can no longer ignore the implications of this war," High Counselor Kilth of the Exantari said, her many eyes narrowing in deep thought. "What we are witnessing is not just a defense against an invasion. Earth is on the verge of changing the balance of power in the galaxy. They are resourceful, adaptable, and relentless. Perhaps it is time we acknowledge the potential of humanity." Ambassador Renar of the Telkar Dominion shifted uneasily in his seat. "Are we prepared to offer them a seat at this table? A species with no advanced technology, no understanding of galactic governance, and no standing among the other races." Kylth's tone was unwavering. "We are prepared to offer them the future of the galaxy, Reinar. Earth's capacity for unity, for defying the odds, could bring something none of us have ever had: true cooperation. Their unpredictability is their greatest strength, but they will need guidance. It is up to us whether we view them as a threat or an ally." Reinar's skepticism remained, but it was clear that even he understood the gravity of the situation. The Valkar, once the undisputed rulers of conquest, were failing against a species that had no place in their galaxy. Yet here they were, forcing the Council to reconsider everything. "The Valkar are losing, and they know it," Ambassador Tizor of the Vraxa remarked, his voice edged with concern. "What will they do if they retreat? If they are forced to admit defeat, they will not take it lightly, and their pride will lead to consequences none of us can foresee." Kilth nodded. "The Valkar will never admit defeat easily, but that is not our concern. Earth has proven that it is capable of standing alone against overwhelming odds. Our duty now is to decide how we move forward." Outside the chamber, the galaxy was watching. News of Earth's victory was spreading like wildfire, broadcasted across the stars. Species who had once viewed humanity as insignificant now saw them as something more, something far more powerful than their technology or their military. The resistance that had once been dismissed as futile was now being hailed as a symbol of hope, not just for Earth, but for every species that had ever been pushed to the brink. As Tikath's fleet began to retreat from Earth's orbit, the eyes of the galaxy turned toward the planet below. The Valkar's defeat was imminent, but the real question remained: would Earth's victory become a symbol of humanity's rise, or would it be a warning of the consequences of defying the established order? The choice was now in the hands of the Galactic Council, and Earth had already shown its hand. The Valkar fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, had retreated into the vastness of space, leaving behind the scared remnants of their failed invasion. Earth had withstood the impossible, and in the process, had not only proven their ability to defend themselves, but had also reshaped the future of the galaxy. The world watched as humanity stood triumphant, and the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath in anticipation of what came next. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the representatives gathered again, the weight of the decision before them heavier than any they had faced before. The question was no longer whether Earth could survive. It was whether humanity would be welcomed into the fold of galactic powers, or if they would remain isolated, left to rebuild in the shadow of their victory. High Counselor Kilth stood, her many eyes scanning the room. Her tone was firm, but filled with an underlying sense of hope. "We stand at a crossroads. The Valkar's defeat is a victory for all who cherish freedom, and it is clear that humanity has the potential to become a force for good in the galaxy. They fought not just for their survival, but for the survival of a way of life that has been lost to many of us." Ambassador Renar's voice broke through the silence, leaden with skepticism. "They are still a young species, untested beyond their own world. Can we trust them? What's to stop them from challenging the established order, from becoming another empire like the Valkar?" Because they have something the Valkyr never had, Kalith responded, her voice unwavering. The humans have something far more powerful than any fleet, any weapon, unity. They fought because they believed in something greater than themselves. The Valkyr underestimated them because they didn't understand this fundamental truth. That is their strength. The room fell quiet, and for the first time, the counselors did not respond with cynicism. The seeds of doubt planted by humanity's victory were beginning to take root in their minds. The Valkyr had failed, and they had failed because they had underestimated an unpredictable, deeply passionate species. Ambassador Tizor of the Vraxa spoke up, his voice thoughtful. Perhaps it is time for a new perspective. The humans have shown resilience that even the greatest of us have lost. Maybe they are what we need, not as subjects or pawns, but as partners. It was clear now that the resistance on Earth, once thought to be a desperate cry for help, had become a symbol of something greater, a new force on the galactic stage. No longer would Earth be seen as an isolated, primitive planet. Humanity had earned its place, not through sheer power, but through unwavering resolve. Tikath, now far from Earth's orbit, still seethed with resentment. His defeat was a bitter pill, one that he had not yet swallowed. The Valkyr would not forget this day. The humiliation of failure stung him deeply, but deep down, he knew this battle was far from over. And yet, as he looked to the stars, he could not shake the nagging feeling that Earth had just begun to show its true potential. Back on Earth, Commander Sarah Drake stood before a massive gathering of world leaders. The flags of nations fluttered in the wind, but now, alongside the flags of individual countries, a single flag flew proudly, a new symbol of human unity, one that transcended borders. "We have proven that we are capable of standing against the greatest of odds," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "But this victory is just the beginning. We have earned our place among the stars. Now it is up to us to build a future where we stand together, not just as humans, but as part of a larger galaxy." The battle was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. The new dawn of humanity's rise had arrived, and with it came the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities.